Hey guys, Emily here, and I am back with a video for our reading intervention teachers in particular. Now, today we are going to talk about progress monitoring of our students. This is about beginning of February, so you've got new groups, and we're looking at ensuring that our kids are making progress, and what do we do to gather that information and then make any changes as needed. So that is our big focus today. But before we get right into it, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, share, click the little bell icon so that you get notified when I drop a new video. Now, my apologies. I have been slammed, and I'm trying to bring back our videos a little more consistently so that I can continue to kind of help guide you through my experience. So I hope you will join me for that. All right, so let's get right into it. Let me tell you a couple things. I'm working with some new intervention teachers across the country, and I had this one conversation with one of just a wonderful, wonderful teacher. Shout out to Mary Jo. Thank you, Mary Jo. Because we had this really interesting conversation about interpreting the progress monitoring results and what does it mean? What do we do with our instruction? So I thought this would be a really good opportunity to not only show you with a potential graph and how you can actually document the progress of your students in your intervention, but also to look a little closer at some common patterns that you might be seeing in the data and what those things actually mean. So that is what we are going to do today. I'm actually going to take you into some documents from Acadience. You know, I am a trainer for Acadience. I love them. They are the best. It's a fantastic tool, full disclosure. So what I have is available on the website. And I'm going to link it below so that you have access to it. And it really gives you more information about progress monitoring. If you are an intervention teacher and you are not regularly checking your students' progress while you are delivering additional instruction, then you're really missing an important and vital component to a strong reading intervention program. Okay, so that's the first thing. We need to make sure that we are progress monitoring our students. Now, about 3 years ago, I did a video related to kind of some of the basics about progress monitoring. What is it? Why do we do it? When do we do it? And what do we use it for? If you want to go back, I'll link that one in the show notes as well so you can see it. And I'm a little younger than hair's a little different, room's a little different. Speaking of room, I needed a change. So I figured if you wanted to, you could listen to me or you could read behind me and be inspired by some of the things that I live by, some of my mantras. All right, so let's get right into it. Let's start by talking about the, progress monitoring. Ideally, progress monitoring should be done every 2 to 3 weeks with the students that you are providing additional instruction or intervention to. The progress monitoring should also match the skill that you are teaching. Now, when I say that, we're talking about those essential early literacy skills related to phonemic awareness, phonics, the alphabetic principle, oral reading fluency, comprehension. Okay, that's what we're looking for to match our progress monitoring related to that. And so that's the first thing. You have to be doing this consistently because the whole point of collecting progress monitoring is so that you can make timely, responsive decisions based on the performance of your students while you're delivering this instruction. We need to be responsive to our students. We need to quickly determine if the instruction that we've matched, the skills that we've matched, the curriculum that we've matched is actually working for that student. We do not have an entire 8, 9, 12, 16, 18 weeks to see if that extra instruction we're doing is actually working. So we want to do this periodically. And once we can see a pattern, we are looking for patterns in the data. If we see consistently that a student is falling below their aim line or target line of growth, we need to make a change. And we won't know that until we collect enough data to actually make that data-driven decision. So that's the first part of this. The second part of it is, well, what do we use? And I am a full Acadience user, believer, and all of that. So whatever screening tool that you're using that is efficient, economical, it is determined to be predictive of later reading outcomes, then that is something that you could use. But you don't want to do a 20-minute assessment every 2 weeks to check their progress. It won't work. You don't have enough time. So the Acadience measures are fantastic. Dibbles, AimsWeb, which I'm not personally familiar with, but I've heard that could possibly be used as well. So let's go in. I'm going to share my screen and bring up a graph that we use in Acadience. And again, this is part of what is available online for everybody at acadiancelearning.org. It is in a PDF, and so I will go ahead and share that with you. Let me pull up the right one. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the back of an Acadience progress monitoring student assessment little binder booklet, I guess is what we would call it. And this happens to be for a second grade oral reading fluency. And I'm going to show you some examples and things with oral reading fluency and the nonsense word fluency, just to kind of help you depending on if you're working with older students or younger students. So we can see this is the progress monitoring graph. Again, these are also available for download and printing for free at acadiancelearning.org. And this is the back of the booklet and the paper pencil version. If you decide to do the online scoring, the digital scoring through ALO on Acadience Learning Online, this is all done automatically for you. There's no calculation, no plotting. It's really kind of handy. So this, though, is let me see if I bring that down just a smidge. Okay, so you can see here, we're looking at imagining that our students are being progress monitored from the beginning of the year, but it may just be a semester. It just depends on where you started with your student. And what we need to do is first plot where their benchmark was so that we know where those students started. And we can have that when we know where they started and we know what the target is at the end of the year, we can create an aim line or basically a trajectory line that if we're progress monitoring and our student is falling on or above that aim line, then with time, we are making adequate progress to get that student back on track. So that's the whole point of graphing it. It's very handy. Again, I like the ALO tool also. So what you can see here is we've got these different colored lines, and the green line represents where the at benchmark point is for that point in time for that grade level. And you can see that the aim lines, the target lines, the goal for that window changes. And that's because when kids are at the beginning of the school year, the first semester, the target is different than when they're at the middle or at the end. And so those targets will change. We can also see that trajectory line has been established, and down below we can keep track of how often we want to progress monitor those students. So the idea is, I'm going to change my tools here so that I can give you some ideas. So let's say that come September, the student has been monitored at about 43 words per minute. Change that color so you can see it. And let's say in another couple of weeks, we do another one and they're fallen along this trajectory line. Okay, they might dip, but they come back up. Okay, and they seem to be making some growth. That's great. If I were seeing something like this with the progress monitoring, to me, what that tells me is that the supplemental instruction that I'm providing is working on the student. The student is actually responding to that. And all things continuing, that student should be on track to make that goal by the end of the year. Now, let's say we do this again, and I am going to now, I'm assessing another student, progress monitoring them. And, you know, let me change that. Sorry about that. So they're at 43 and they're kind of staying around 43. And then every couple of weeks we're testing them, right? And there's still, maybe there's growth, but maybe it's not enough. And it's below the aim line. Now, within 3 of these data points, I should have enough information and time with that student that I realize I need to make a change. I can either change the size of the group itself, the curriculum, the pacing of the curriculum, the amount of time that I'm giving to that student. But something has to change, or else I am going to continue with this student throughout the year, and we're not going to make that target. So this is one of the biggest reasons why we don't want to just wait and do this in December. If we are only assessing our students at the beginning, where we know they're right here, let's say, and then we assess them again in December, and we assess them again in May, that's a whole lot of missed opportunity there. So progress monitoring frequently, charting that information on a graph like this or your own, is a really powerful tool for helping you to make some important decisions based on how your individual students are responding to the instruction. Now, let me take you down to another one. I want to introduce something else to you. We often hear with intervention teachers or even classroom teachers, well, the student is growing and growing is good. And you know what? Growth is good, but sometimes it's not enough. Our job as interventionists is to expedite the growth, and we need to help that student make better than typical progress. If they're just making typical progress, that just means that they're going to still be below everybody else. So we have to expedite that. And so one of the things that when you're looking at this information, and I love what Acadience does with this in particular, is they've created something called a pathway of progress. And what this does, it's actually based on percentile rankings. There's a formula, I'm sure, and inside of ALO, all of this is done automatically. But we can look at our students' progress, and based on that trajectory line that is established from the progress monitoring points, we can see, are they making typical progress, above typical progress, well above, well below. Now, let's say that we have a student that is super, super behind everybody else. We're talking well below benchmark at the beginning. Let's say they were down here, okay? And we see this goal. Let's say that our goal is like right here by the end of the year. And we know that this trajectory line, quite honestly, is too steep. That is going to be a really, really difficult progression for that student. And so let's say that we adjust that goal and we're like, listen, it's going to take more than 1 year to catch that kid up because they are so far behind. And so we can go in and set our own goal. And we could say, you know, if I could get them to here by the end of the year, changing this trajectory here, this is more achievable. The student is likely to find more success here. And I know that I've got a student who's going to be with me for more than 1 year, and that's okay. So we don't want to choose to look to the student's success and our success based on, well, they didn't make this end of the year goal. Well, golly, if the kid is so far behind, that's almost inaccessible at this point. So we can celebrate the student's success here, because even with this, my guess is, I don't have the numbers, I'm just drawing, but if that student is making above typical or well above typical growth during that year, if they keep doing that the next year and the next year, they will get back on track. So keep that in mind when you are like, oh, kid didn't make it to grade level. It might take a little bit of time, right? And so looking at these pathways of progress can be really inspiring. Some of your lowest students, once they are given really good instruction, they may make well above typical growth, and that is phenomenal. So there's one other thing I want to show you here. I think it's going to go into, okay, so here's more of that pathways of progress and where that student is. Because if you look at this kid here that's on this yellow line, let's say, are they growing? Yeah. Is growing enough? No, it's not enough. So we have to do more than just growth. We've got to make better than typical progress for many of our students. And again, it can be over a number of years. So using something like this and just plotting it by hand and creating that aim line. I used to get a ruler. This is before digital scoring. And I would get a ruler and create a line and then show the kids, you know, at the end, look where you are. Here's where we want to be. Here's our next goal for next time. Super empowering. Okay, so let's look at this. Some of you are working with primary students, let's say, and you may be progress monitoring with a phoneme segmentation measure or a nonsense word fluency measure. Both are great. You may even have a student that is 4th or 5th grade, but they don't have the skills yet to really show any growth in the oral reading fluency because they're so significantly behind. And in that case, you should really choose to progress monitor with the nonsense word fluency, because this is going to help us to identify the growth with the alphabetic principle, with the automaticity of blending. And once they get there, then that oral reading fluency is going to be a measure that may find more, you might see bigger changes or more changes. So nonsense word there are 2 scores within Acadians, and many of these are the same. We've got the, let's see, change my color here so you can see it. Here, this is the correct letter sounds. This is how many sounds can they get in when reading a series of nonsense words. And this is how many words they can read as whole words one time and one time only without sounding out. So it's really looking at the automaticity that the student has in their decoding and their blending. And so 2 different scores. And we can measure both of these scores on the same graph. They're just different lines. You could make them in different colors if you wanted, but the goal is still the same as we did with the oral reading fluency. We are still looking at where did they start? Where do we need them to be? What is our aim line? And then checking periodically to see, are they either on that aim line? If they're below, we've got to make a change. Once, let's say the kid goes here to here, and then I've got bam and bam, right? Well, they achieved this way early. That's a potential kid who's going to move out of intervention. That's great. Don't wait till the end of the semester to do that. When you have 3 or 4 data points and you can see that trend, that's enough. Check with the teacher, make sure the student's generalizing that information, but those are some things to look out for. Let's see. This particular nonsense word fluency, I don't think it's grade specific. grade 1 end of the year benchmark goals. That will drop off with second grade. And so depending on what you're doing, you would probably have to use a first grade nonsense word or a second grade nonsense word in order to get this particular graph. So while I'm standing here or sitting here looking at this one graph, I want to talk to you about a couple of patterns that you may be seeing in your progress monitoring data. And so let me see if I can kind of figure this out for you really quickly. Let's imagine that you had a student who was doing really well up here, right? They're correct letter sounds. They know all the sounds. They're doing them quicker and they're doing really well with the sounds. But down below, they were not blending. They may have still been recoding, you know, sounding out and then saying the word, but they're not high here. Now, this skill of the whole word read is really the marker for, are they blending with automaticity, which would help us for the student having those prerequisite skills for decoding and blending in their oral reading fluency. So let's say you're progress monitoring this kid, okay, just for conversation's sake. And you start to notice, okay, wow, kids coming up here, their whole word read, they're starting to get it. However, this might start to drop. So this sometimes happens, and I want to walk you through what this may mean. All of these are just potential answers to why it could be. It's not the be all end all. But when I want you to think about it like this, when students, they know their sounds, they're automatic. They're popping off those sounds quick, quick, quick. But now they're having to use a new skill, and they're having to first blend that word and say it. And sometimes the kids will sub-vocalize. So they'll look at the word and in their head, they're decoding it. And then they say the word. Okay. So that takes time, which means this is going to come down. And they will do that as they start to build confidence. And then eventually they'll be faster with that. So you may see this little trend happen here. And then later you might see, you might see that it starts to pick back up again, okay, as it gets there. So I don't want you to think that, well, their letter sounds dropped. Are they losing this? No. No, they're starting to generalize that skill into the blending, and it is typical. So what I would do is keep progress monitoring with that particular measure until I can ensure that the whole words read are being read with automaticity. That would be what I personally would do. All right, so let's look at really quickly another potential situation that could happen. I'm going to come up here to this one. Let's go to this one. Okay. So another potential situation that could happen with oral reading fluency. So we know that when a student's, there are two really important scores that I look at. I look at the rate, the correct words per minute, and I look at the accuracy. What percentage of the words did they get correct? I'm going to hold the retell for another conversation in just a moment. But so the oral reading fluency rate and the accuracy, which is represented by the number of errors or in a percentage. So here's another thing that typically happens with a kiddo. If the accuracy is low, okay, accuracy, they're making a lot of errors. When the accuracy is low, we need to go back and look at where is that student with decoding. You might even want to go in and do a nonsense word progress monitor. You may do a phonics screener to see if they have all of those phonics patterns under their belt in order to be able to decode. But a lack of accuracy or a low accuracy score indicates some kind of an issue, typically at the word level, at the decoding level, or at the phonics level, okay? So it's always the first place that I would go to look. So you may end up with a student, and let's just say that we have, well, I'm not sure how I can represent a, I guess I'll do it this way. I'm going to try to just represent a accuracy. Okay. Let's say it's accuracy. And I am plotting my students' oral reading fluency, and maybe they're saying a whole bunch of words, but they're not very accurate. Saying a whole bunch of words, but they're still making a lot of mistakes. Okay. Just for illustration point. You're doing word work, you're doing nonsense word fluency, you're doing phonics, you're doing all that good stuff. So what may start to happen is that the students' words correct per minute drop, but their accuracy goes up. All right. Now, remember that the brain only has so much cognitive energy to focus on any one particular skill. And so what they may be doing is slowing down, using all of those skills with the decoding so that they can get it right. And it takes time. And then as they continue to build fluency, maybe you're using repeated reading as kind of a fluency builder, what you'll see is this should start to come back up. And hopefully this accuracy will stay up as well. So that is a pattern that I have seen quite a bit. It does not mean that your student is losing the fluency. Again, they are generalizing that skill with the word work and making sure that it is solid. And it takes time in the brain to do that. So that is something that you may see as well. And then I have one other scenario which happens. Let's say that you have a student who is, they are along this trajectory line, right? Okay, their words per minute. But I'm going to make another pretend line just for the sake of a target line. Let's say this line represents the retail. And what you may see is that the student is reading well, but they're not able to retell what they have read. And so what's required is moving faster than what they are able to do. So let's say that the retell can be affected for a whole bunch of reasons. And in the Acadience training, there is information that tells us what the research says is that the retell correlates moderately to comprehension as a skill versus the oral reading fluency correlating strongly. So you kind of want to keep it in that perspective. But if a student is taking so much brain energy to work on saying the words correctly, being accurate, getting the rate appropriately, there just may simply be nothing left to really think about, visualize what they're reading. And so how does this improve? Well, a couple of things could happen. Ideally, once they truly have reached automaticity and the brain doesn't need to think about decoding and fluency, there should be more energy left to focus on what they're actually reading. But you may have to provide some direct instruction related to visualizing and that sort of thing. But I don't want you to jump the gun here. So if you see these numbers, kind of dropping, but the retell is going up, it may be a transfer of that energy and the student's focus. So once I personally keep my focus on building the automaticity, supporting comprehension through read alouds and discussion and that sort of thing. And then when I know that they've got that component at the word level and the fluency level, then I would start bringing in some direct intervention related to comprehension. But I don't want you to split your focus. If you know the student has a word deficit and the student has a fluency deficit, of course they're going to have a comprehension deficit. That's to be expected for the most part. So focus on what's going to move the needle everywhere, and it's really at that fluency and that word level. All right. I know that was a lot, but I hope what we were able to do is to illustrate to you what that progress monitoring can do, how you can see it, how you can use it, how you can interpret it, and give you just some additional food for thought. We know my biggest takeaways here, I think, are make sure that you're progress monitoring frequently and consistently, and that you are looking at the data and seeing what that means for instruction. Don't just do it sporadically. It's not going to be as effective. All right. I would love to hear how your progress monitoring is going. Do you have any other weird situations that we might be able to kind of see if there's a reason behind it? And don't forget, there are weird things that happen. Like I've had kids do weird things and I just couldn't figure it out. It's kind of like being a detective. And so those things happen and we do the best we can with what we're given. But at this point, let's look at it for what we can do to drive that student's growth so that we can change the outcome for that student. Because if we don't do anything, they're going to stay right where they are. And that's just not acceptable to me. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Please leave me a comment, shoot this thing a little thumbs up and hit the bell and all those good things. I am happy to be here. If you want to hear something specific that I can help you with, drop me a comment. I would love to be of assistance to you in that way. And if you are looking for some additional coaching and support, feel free to drop me an email, readingdiva06@gmail.com, or you can join our Facebook at Reading Lab SOS. There's all kinds of places to see me. Thank you for what you do. You are appreciated. I know sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but you are. And talk soon. Bye for now.